Well, hey everyone, it's Dr. Matt Stranick. I'm going to throw the doctor on there. I don't necessarily prefer to, but this is very early on, the early of the Writers on Writing new interview series, and it is associated with my role as a teacher of English of some, I don't want to say notoriety, but certainly a lot of years on the job. I can claim that, and a lot of them in various public and online kind of ways. And so, with that great kind of endeavor situating us here, this is actually going to be the first full of these series that people even get to see. It's not going to be the first that's recorded, but it is going to be the first going out because I am deeply pleased and stoked to present Jim Ruland, who is a really, to my mind, significant writer. I've referred to him as a writer's writer. I reached out to him a year and a half ago at this point, based on his significant contributions to rock literature, I'm going to say, writ large, because anybody who is like anything more than a passing fan of guitar-based music, I mean, you got to know about Bad Religion. You got to know about all the various offshoots of SSD bands. And even if you don't necessarily know, like, oh, SSD Records was a thing, I mean, you can't mention Dinosaur Jr., you can't mention Sonic Youth, you can't mention Soundgarden without that. And Jim is the writer on record for these and Circle Jerks, Keith Morris. I could go on. We will. That's exactly part of what this is about. Jim, thank you so much for, again, agreeing on very short notice in a very busy schedule for you tonight. I will be mindful of the time. You just kind of have to set it up for the folks, and much appreciation and respect for you to being here, sir.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Thank you, man. So I'm just going to kick into it with my sort of first opening gambit. Again, what I would say that kind of differentiates what we have had as conversation in the past.
Yep.
Because, folks, this is the second time we've had a conversation, and the links to all associated and sundry materials are in the notes below. I'm, trying to emphasize the search engine optimization, as it were, with this stuff, much as possible. And I am going to say here, it's a holistic approach, right? We're kind of looking at artistic endeavor, and with the writing, obviously, at the forefront of that, with a side healthy dose of punk rock music. And that's kind of the idea here, pal. So, again, much appreciation and respect to agreeing in such short notice to participating in such. So, my first question is really, sir, how long would you consider yourself as having been involved in the arts? Because I know you've had various phases of your life. You've had a significant military career. You've gone to college. You've done various things. What was the artistic trajectory relative to your sort of self-realization as a person?
Sure. I would say it was when I started writing for punk rock zines. And when I was doing those zines, writing columns, interviewing bands, writing record reviews and live reviews and things like that, I probably didn't think of it as the beginning of an artistic career or anything in such lofty terms.
Okay.
It was the kind of writing that I was drawn to, and it was the kind of writing that I had access to. Two things. It was like the intersection of what I was really passionate about and what was right there in front of me. I was ambitious. I had other things I wanted to do. I was young and wanted to write novels and do all these things, but I really didn't have the tools to do that yet, or the wherewithal, and probably the confidence either. So looking back and seeing all the countless interviews I did and how that really prepared me for writing for an audience. Because even in the 90s, before the internet, before social media, writing in those zines, you might not, it wasn't like you could put something online and someone would say, great piece, Jim, or like, you got it all wrong, Jim, and get immediate feedback like you do today. And these zines are not the New York Times, they're not the LA Times. They take months to put together. They go out in the mail. They sit in toilet tanks of punk houses, and people would read them occasionally. And then maybe a year later, you'd go to a punk rock show and say, "Oh, I like that thing you wrote about that thing," and you would both struggle to remember what you were talking about, and what you'd even written. So, but over the years, I did learn how to, you know, write for more than just myself, to write for an audience, to engage readers, and, share not just my opinion, but also what I thought was, valuable about the contributions of the people I was writing about.
Man, thank you for that. There's a lot that I could extemporize upon there, and I won't. But that's a very thoughtful, fulsome answer. I really, if I could say, notice a theme from beginning to end of what you just sort of unpacked there was the connection to community as being so important, right? I mean, without the shows, there's no zines. Without the promoter, without the bartender, without the musicians, without the toothless weirdo hanging out by the VLT. I mean, these are all, everybody kind of has their part, right? Everybody kind of has their thing.
Yep.
I think in the days of analog media, pre-digital, pre-ubiquitous online, I just think that those connections really seem maybe more precious and more resonant in the moment than what we kind of currently have. I think we've traded in some ways certain things, and I think you really hit the nail on the head there, pal.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, man.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, literally brings me back. And so, can I also then go to, you know, so I mean, I remember having dyslexia in grade two. I remember like my grade two teacher like sitting down with me and like, well, we're going to cause you to like write properly and kind of, I mean, there were things I can sort of point to and go, not necessarily from the cultural standpoint, because I mean, what you just spoke to, going to shows, being involved in that, yes, of course. But I mean, like, were your parents educated people? Did you come from a background where, it was something where, was it an easy thing to sort of move into the roles kind of just that you described? Or, I mean, what was the story behind that, if I can ask?
Yeah, no, my father, he had a master's degree in history. He was a naval officer, and my mom went to nursing school. You know, we had
Awesome.
we had books in the house. We had a set of encyclopedias. We had the great books, which I never read. The type was too small for me even back then. But my parents were from New York, and when my dad was a naval officer, we moved around quite a bit. And as there was four of us kids, and as we got older, they were getting increasingly alarmed by the fact that living in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., we needed them to take us literally everywhere. And being from New York, they were not accustomed to that. They were like, kids had freedom. They could just jump on the subway, jump on a bus, and go where they needed to go. So they made it a point that we lived close to our school and close to the center of the community, so that the rec center and the recreation center and the library, and our school and our church, were all in walking distance. That also meant like the bookstore and the comic book store and all that kind of stuff. So I think that was, the key, is that I had the library very close. I didn't need to say, Mom, Dad, I need to go to the library. If I wanted to go to the library, I could go. And I did.
Again, man, much respect to what you just described there, because I think sometimes like it's helpful just to kind of step back a tad and kind of go, okay, let's kind of examine the wider terrain before moving forward, vis-a-vis where we've been. And I think your discussion here about certainly, intentional choices by your family to kind of make it so that those experiences were readily available
Yeah.
says a lot about your parents, says a lot because again, I can relate, man. I mean, I grew up, within walking distance of universities, schools, all the rest of it. I mean, it was shown by like the value that your parents placed on stuff.
Well,
Um,
the flip side of that is that they were just sick of and fucking tired of driving us everywhere. So they said, "You guys are on your own. We did our part. Now you figure out the rest."
the day that my own children were like comfortable to both just get on the bus and travel vis-a-vis public transit, I don't have a driver's license. I managed to escape that somehow. But that was just like, okay, off you get. You got agency now. That
Yeah.
I felt was a good moment. But I have to notice now, which I didn't from our previous conversation, and it does lead me quite well into my next scripted question. Be mindful of time, sir. I am appreciative of this. Is that I didn't know that your dad was also a military guy.
Oh yeah.
And I know that the military service is just a factor in your life significantly, just as a career wise, and as something I think it's fair to say you've returned to through your various writings with your uh, very significant and very lit. This man's Substack is something you have to check out like last week, but we're just going to keep just re-upping it because it actually yours is the only one I'm paying for on that whole fucking platform.
Well,
But anyway, that's just links below and such. Just we'll keep it tight here. But I guess my significant question here is, man. I mean, between the beard and between the fact that you've done time in the army, like, do you feel like Hemingway? If so, how much? And then that's not actually the question. But the real question is, how much did that inform what you do now? I mean, what's the overlap for us normies who just have never been around military stuff whatsoever?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it was the Navy. I was in, not the Army. But
Sorry,
think
that's important.
I think it was a pretty significant thing for me because, I went in, I enlisted right out of high school, and
Okay.
You're 18 years old and you think you've got a few things figured out. I don't think I was ever, so full of myself that I knew everything about everything. But that's kind of the view. You get out of high school, you think, okay, I graduated, I got some things figured out, and then you enter the world and you're like, oh, I really don't. But like, I think when the world is boot camp, you figure out very quickly how little you actually know, and how the whole structure, it's, basic training is structured to give you a whole new world and a whole new language to learn.
That
And
is awesome. That is an excellent way of describing it and framing it. That is very thoughtful. Thank you for that.
yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, though, is I was like the oldest child of, Irish Catholic parents. They were very strict. My dad was a naval officer. I went to Catholic school,
Oh
and
man,
I don't want to say that boot camp in the 80s was easy, because it wasn't. But when I got there, I felt like a square peg in a square hole. Like, it's like I was like, yeah, I can do this.
it
I've
wasn't outside your like mental or what
yeah, I
cultural
mean,
reference points to do it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I
my
got
dad
you.
was not the great Santini. He was not, what you would call a ball breaker by any stretch. But I've been putting on a uniform every day my whole life. I've been, conscious of the way I talked, and, you know, addressing people of a higher station, et cetera, et cetera. So like, it wasn't the culture shock that maybe it was for some people. I know it wasn't. And
And so,
I would go on to say that when I went to college was more of after I got out of the Navy, was more of a culture shock than when I went into boot camp.
well, and this is to me something where it's like, okay, so lots of rules, lots of routine, lots of drill, carrying yourself successfully in this environment. I mean, again, I have within my pretty close family people who have been career law enforcement, military, and it's like, for as you say, right? If you can handle sort of what the moment requires of you and what the general job environment is like, it's like fine, not everybody can. And I think that in itself is much to your credit, sir, that you kind of carried that out as much as you did.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, no, man. And again, actually, what the hell? Patriotism is fucking important. And I think the current moment that we're in probably, I mean, I'm not going there, but
No, I mean,
we could spend a lot of time there, man. We could spend a lot of time there.
and that's not what I got out of it. I think it was more a matter of, and some of the people I served with would laugh because I got in a lot of trouble, and it took me a while to figure things out. But I think it's more about personal accountability and the discipline you learn and applying it to other things. In terms of any kind of sense of nationalism, or I'm
So,
certainly not sitting here, stumping for the war machine of the United States.
Because then you start doing punk rock as your thing, right? And it's like kind of to people who maybe don't do nuance very well. Some people might go, "Oh, wow, he was like in the army, or not the army, but in the armed services. He was in the armed services in the Navy, doing this and that, and now he's like embracing, engaged with, in very significant, personal, meaningful, professional, cultural ways, the whole anti-authoritism kind of gig, which tends to be punk rock, right? I mean, again, I'm not saying that I see any discrepancy there necessarily, but I mean, some people could. I just think it's an interesting contrast, if you will.
Well, I mean, it's really no, it's not revelatory to say that the enlisted ranks of the armed services are made up from the lower classes, and that's nothing new. It's always been that way. I was a middle class kid because of my upbringing and my dad being a naval officer. But once I got in, I didn't get any special treatment. I was part of the rank and file, and it was very eye opening to be in that. We didn't get any real special training. We just did. I was in first division in deck division in the Navy, and it's like you don't get any. You get basic training, you're sent right to the fleet, but basically to be part of like the workforce.
You get your assignment and then you sort of thrive, or sort of do otherwise, right? Sustain.
You just try to make it until you just try. It's like a war of attrition and not get in trouble enough that you get you kicked out, or you don't get, pop a piss test and get kicked out, or get in a fight enough times and get kicked out, or say what you really feel to superior officers and get kicked out. Or in the 80s, be gay and get kicked out. There were so many ways to get drummed out of the military. So it was really just a matter of just trying to jump through the hoops and get out when your enlistment was over, which was a good skill, especially for getting through university and things like that. You don't have to be invested in every single aspect of it to one, get through it, and two, get something out of it.
Well, thank you for that. And I guess, again, I don't necessarily want to necessarily have the whole moment here overly on that period of time. But I think it does lead into actually very directly the next scripted question that I have. But I will just simply add, just as by way of following up on what you just described, that I agree with and wholeheartedly believe what you just said. Again, based on the fact that I have grandparents who were Army, military on both sides. One of them Army, one of them Air Force, and then just like first responders, various kinds, and my whole immediate thing, and what you just described completely rings out. So again, man, respect for representing that. So again, right with the armed services, there's a huge amount of habit and routine. How much does that factor into your life as a writer and creative right now, my friend?
Oh, it's everything. Because
How so?
without habit and routine, you don't really have um, a writing career. You're just chasing deadlines, and I think this kind of shows itself when you're like a very busy person. There was a time when I worked full time and was teaching part time, and still writing and still working on projects, and I would was so busy I had to like do laundry on my calendar, but I still made time to write. And then you have the opposite problem when you're working freelance and you have as much time as all the time in the world, where you set your own schedule, and if you don't do the writing, it just doesn't happen. And you can find yourself doing even less work than if you did have a job and if you did have other guardrails that to navigate through. So I found that I'm in a period of my life where I'm freelancing, and the habits that I have um, and the discipline I've always had from an early on have really served me well, especially in times when like you have a book due, like you have it when you sell a book and you're writing a book, then or collaborating with people, you and sell it to a publisher, you have a deadline and you've got to get it done. And then sometimes you have projects that don't work out, that fall through, and you have to start up with something else. And you can either feel sorry for yourself, or you can use the time that you're not working on that project that didn't work out on one of your own projects. So I'm always very conscious of that. And the older I get, I think I'm getting even better at it, just because I'm now on the flip side of things where I know I have more lived experience than I have days remaining on the calendar.
We're only about 10 years different in age. I think I looked at your Wikipedia page and realized that I'm turning 47 in a
Yep.
couple months. So, the person who I do an education podcast with, Dr. Doug Reed, is actually about your age. And so I definitely consider myself representing from the sort of final segment of Gen X, where I sort of consider you guys as kind of being Gen X prime, if I can use a term there.
Mm.
And so, again, man, I've really sort of appreciated surveying your career and just sort of engaging with the novel, obviously, as well as, I guess, what first drew me in. The SST book is what I sort of got into, but then as well, the Bad Religion book, obviously. Do you have, I mean, apart from the life of sort of an omnivore expert in various modes, if you just kind of had your druthers and all things were equal, do you have any sort of mode of writing fiction, non-interview, like whatever? Which of those modes is generally the most natural to you, given your sort of personhood, interest, and experience? If I can ask.
Well, that's a interesting question. I think when I have a deadline for a nonfiction project, I know I really wish that I was just making stuff up instead of having to chase down all those pesky details.
Yes.
And there are times when I've been revising a novel and know it's not working to my satisfaction and not really sure why, that I just wish that I could just rely on a transcript and just dig out the facts and just tell it like it is, rather than having to use my imagination to solve a problem. So the grass is always greener, but I'm doing exactly what I want to do. So whether it's interviewing a band, writing a book review, collaborating with other musicians or other creative people, or working on my own fiction projects. It's all stuff I want to do. It's work, but it's not necessarily a job that someone is putting on me. I want to do it all.
It's not a separation from what you'd be doing if there was no other option, right? Like if you just had the ability to just sort of go through a normal day and somehow money just did not even factor into the thing. I think what you just described, right? Because I'm teaching a class on media this semester I'm teaching a class on like literally class and literature. And for me, something that's come from that is just like what comes across in all that really is, just like, would I be doing this anyway? Do I find this enjoyable anyway, what I'm doing right
Right.
now? And like for me, right, like talking to motivated, smart, kids, people who are in their like late teens and early 20s about books, narrative, like, yeah, I think I can handle that. Or doing stuff like this, right? Reaching out to serious decades long practitioners in the literary forms. Because again, like I said, I've done stuff myself. I consider myself somebody who's involved in it, all of it. So again, right, when you get up to years, the point that you raised just now or just a little bit ago, to the effect that you got less time in front of you, it really sharpens your focus. It really sharpens your perspective. Certainly, I'm experiencing that. And when I look at your Instagram, man, you are valuing experience. You are traveling. You are all over the place with travel. And that is like my third last scripted question here. Being mindful of time, sir, and with respect, that how much do you enjoy travel? How much do you throw it into your world of life and travel and work? How does it all go together, sir, for those of us who say don't travel as much as you do?
Yeah. Well, I think, I worked for, 20 years at various desk jobs, some of them more colorful than others. I worked, for example, in a tribal casino, but it was all kind of like marketing and things like that. And at the end of the day, I'm sitting at a desk and I'm writing copy, and some of it's more entertaining than others. And I did that for about 20 years. And when I told myself, when my daughter goes off to college, I am going to walk the earth. I'm going to go, if I want to go to a reading in New York, I'm going to go to a reading in New York. If I want to visit a friend in San Francisco, I'm going to visit a friend in San Francisco. And then what happened is the pandemic happened, and I didn't go anywhere, and neither did you or anyone listening to this. So yeah, that was a very sobering time, and now my daughter is getting ready to graduate from college. So for the last couple of years, I've had this window where I've been able to travel, and a lot of it has to do with my wife's work. She travels a lot, so I tag along with her. That makes it a little bit easier and a lot more affordable. And but also I would say in the last year and a half, I've taken advantage of more opportunities to create space for myself for writing and going away to residencies in different places. I'm always, I'm kind of a cheap traveler in that I'm always looking for like the cheapest flight I can get, the budget accommodation. Yeah, I'm looking to see how I could save money and make it more affordable. And then what I do is once I make that payment, well, then I'll see like, well, maybe I can upgrade this seat and I can get a little bit more comfortable, or maybe I could find a way to, stay at a friend's house and enjoy their house and things. So I do it. I'm not going to say I do it in like punk rock style, sleeping on floors and things like that. But yeah, it's not like I'm gallivanting around, but it's really interesting in this that like when I was working those desk jobs, anytime I could break free, I wanted everyone to know that I made it out. Like I'm on a fucking beach, man. Check me out. I'm not. I got out of the cube, and now that I can travel more and do travel more, I'm more hesitant to share the details until it's over, just because um, it's just weird, like people knowing where you are all the time.
Man, there's so much that you just sort of put into that where I had to write this down. When my daughter turns 20, I will walk the earth. I mean, I had a conversation. I had a conversation with my son where he was like, I was like, I'm hanging out. It's Friday. He was like, you should get a dog. I'm like, I can't get a dog. I live in an apartment. I'll get a dog when I own a house. He's like, when are you going to get a house? When I stop paying child support. When do you stop paying child support? When your brother turns 19. That's kind of how I look at it. So again, man, the whole like pinning your sort of personal kind of aspirations. I mean, you got to put the like real stuff first, right? You got to put the kids first.
Oh
You got
yeah.
to put the day stuff first. It's the routine that tests you as a person and gives you all the kind of stuff that, again, Stephen King, right, in On Writing, kind of feeds the boys downstairs. I do think about the boys downstairs quite a bit. You know, what you put into
Yeah.
your subconscious kind of manifests in the life that you lead, and that ends up being, well, yeah, I am still interested as hell in punk rock,
Yeah.
30 years after I discovered it. What the fuck not, right? And so, man, appreciate the standpoint thus far. I notice, again, speaking to the current project, and well, I mean, not the current project, but the novel, certainly. We've spoken to it before. Make It Stop is the name of the
Yeah.
novel, and it is a just dystopian, I think, is a fairly good way of putting it, except that we are living in very dystopian times. And I'm not even being facetious. I'm not here to say fuck Trump and all this. I'm really not. You can check all over my social media for that. Thank you. But I'm like, the last time we talked, it was like, well, Biden was president. Kamala, who the fuck even knows? I mean, it was all pre this,
Yeah.
whatever the fuck we're even living through now. And to me, this actually is like, this is when sharp, comic, intelligent, thoughtful, challenging writing about contemporary scenarios is like more than ever. I'm like, this should be giving your book a headwind, man.
Well,
And so to me, this is just like, how do you feel about it? How do you feel about the narrative you put into the world now that we're in the world that we're in?
well, you caught me in a week where I'm extremely fired up about it, in the sense that, this book came out 2 years ago in April, right? And then I came up with the idea 10 years before that, or 8 years before that. So there was a lot of, labor and revising and rethinking that went into it.
Yeah.
And when it came out, I joked around and like, be careful when you write a near future novel because the future has a way of catching up to you. But this is a book about healthcare vigilantes. And of course, some very shocking things came about in there. This is a book about corporations that have run amok. This is about people being disappeared off the street by private security firms and landing in prison hospitals. All of these things that are in the news today and top of mind, and not fiction, unfortunately, things that are really happening. And there's like a lot of different ways to, like, I'm not going to be here and be like, I told you so, because I wasn't trying to predict the future. I wasn't trying to be the canary in the coal mine or the Cassandra with a vision, for the future. But what got me fired up is the article that came out last week in the Atlantic by Alex Reisner, where he had this bombshell report that pretty much got every writer talking, which was that Meta, in order to train its LLM, its large language model, Llama 3, which is a stupid name, by the way, they used a LibGen, which is a site that pirates millions and millions of books and academic articles. And so, Llama 3 being behind ChatGPT and all the other, large language models and text-based AI applications, wanted to get up to speed in a hurry. And so instead of licensing work, instead of paying, the authors whose work they used to train, they just pirated it. They just
Even
flat
though
out.
like, Meta is just like this, it's like they got the resources, right?
Meta is valued at over $1 trillion. They
Like,
certainly
what in the
can afford it.
actual fuck? That when you sort of disclosed that to me in our communication, I mean, I was just like, I'm reaching out to Jim anyway. I'm interested in what Jim has to say. Jim has written a very timely, thoughtful, prescient novel, I gotta say, which I am seriously. I mean, I'm gonna put it on one of my reading lists for next year. I get to choose. I'm picking one of you. It's showing up on my curriculum.
Mm.
That's how much I think of it. And so, again, man, to hear you describe this when you just sort of mentioned it to me in an interaction, first of all, I had no idea. And I study like a thing called educational technology for a living. Like I'm supposed to know about the AI and the algorithm and this and this.
Yeah,
Um,
well,
so again, man,
it
anything
just
you want to follow up on with what you just described, I'd be interested to hear. I mean, I got the time if you do, my friend. I'd like to just open it up for further elaboration on that specific aspect of it, if you could, my friend.
yeah, well, I was pretty fired up that here's this, mega corporation stealing from the work of millions of writers, and it just kind of bothered me that that there was probably just a fire hose and a bot that did all this stuff. I don't know the particularities of how you know the work was fed into like the gaping maw of this machine, but the fact that like my characters in Make It Stop, who are people from the
Vigilantes.
people who are fighting back against corporations and paying a price for it, are like training the bots, that all these books about punk rock, that the words of Keith Morris, a living legend in Southern California punk and punk anywhere, that the lyrics of Bad Religion, who have motivated more punks to get educated and become a force for good in the world than any other band, that
Even just on the basis of
the
Epitaph
story of
Records.
SST is being used to train these robots, and it's all being stolen. uh, just really bothered me a lot.
It's
And
at cross purposes conceptually, and you are big enough as a person to actually be willing to see it at that level, strictly as opposed to, hey, wait a minute, Mark Zuckerberg, you annoying motherfucker. Like, you're going to just like rip my IP off and just like, because it's so fucking undervalued, and I should take that as a warning shot and be grateful that the AI isn't going to come from my fucking job as a novelist. All of this stuff is interrelated, man. Nothing that happens is happened accidentally. And I think you're being very generous when you say, well, the bot just may have done it, may have, inadvertently scraped the thing. Nah, man, some like lazy Gen Z fucker was on their lunch break and was like, well, I can get an extra analytic if I bring in more volume on the scrape of the scrape. And therefore, I mean, I can't tell you the particularities, but I do have enough background with just information on the internet as a thing for an educational purpose. It's ridiculous and it's disgusting. And the whole discourse online is being very much based by
and,
all of the things you just described.
and so I've been thinking about this and reading up on it, and what's really the irony is that if you go to the Atlantic and read the article, the Atlantic has been in the news quite a bit.
They have,
If
yeah.
you go to the Atlantic and you read the article, or if you go to like LitHub and read a response to it, for example, because apparently this site LibGen that pirated all these things, that made it possible for Meta to scrape it.
Yeah.
If you go on their site, you can find books that haven't even been published yet, which means someone is uploading the advanced readers copies, which is just really, I mean,
It's jarring because they just because it's a business model, right? It's just so clearly
yeah,
it's a business model where it's meant to just completely de-skill anything involved with the arts.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
anything.
the irony is, Matt, is that if you go to these sites, what's going to pop up? Ads for, you know, chat GPT AI, like ads that look like they were written by AI, like they don't even make sense. They're repetitive, but like basically ads for, oh, you're interested in AI and writing. Well, then maybe you want this product. And it's like, fuck you. No, I don't, you know?
It's and no, but again, it's like that's where it's just like literally like somebody will inadvertently lean against a mouse, put through a transaction on their credit card. I mean, it's literally just it turns into a scam, a phishing scam. I resent the content culture that we're in very deeply. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's disgusting. I think anybody who's involved in the real arts whatsoever, writing, music, painting, I don't care what your fucking thing is. I actually take pride in taking certain elements of AI and using them to what I consider a legitimate cultural purpose. I think that there's literacies that are there. And so this is where I sort of see literature and literacy as not being mutually exclusive.
Right.
And this is where I'm trying to bring across people from various areas of endeavor into a ostensibly pretty modest, sort of quasi academic, quasi professional kind of cross cultural endeavor. And again, I think just where there's all this nonsense about, this like between Canada and the US with, 51st state and trade wars and all this nonsense, I'm just like, you know what? I am seeking out active practitioners who are committed and interested and of good conscience and just want to share what makes them tick as creatives. And so I think we can sort of go beyond here, well beyond. You just gave me a very thoughtful, insightful answer as to anything I would have wanted to ask about the large language model. They named it llama, like just fuck, man. The millennials are a fucking disappointment on every
Oh,
fucking.
let's not blame, any of the generations, we can't,
Well, I'm halfway there with you, pal. I'm a teacher, and I'll give them the respect that they earn.
yeah,
And so with that said,
we need Gen Z to save the day.
man up or buckle up. Take your straps, such as it is, and hang the bourgeoisie. No, but not really. But seriously, friend, we've hit the 40-minute mark here. I'm not going out on a bummer vibe. I do like to be sort of, let's speak frankly. Let's speak in ways that express our feelings but in a respectful kind of way in dialogue. And this is what I think anything to do with the arts is so rad. I love being part of the arts. It's clear to me that you do as well.
Yep.
My friend, being respectful of time, given that we're almost at 45 minutes, was there anything else here that we wanted to speak to or shout out? There will be sort of some notes component, which you may want to contribute to. But just while we're here, while we're sort of about to segue out of the show, man, for the recording part, was there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, my friend Eric Raymond, who has a Substack, he doesn't post to it that often, but he said something really interesting, and that is, and I'm extrapolating a little bit on, in that I hear a lot of people saying, with everything going on in the world, like, how can I justify, writing? How can I justify painting or playing guitar? And Eric's response was, doing anything where you do what you want is jamming the signal. If you're not following an algorithm, if you're not being led by the nose to do, into clicking onto what, this product and this video and this thing, if you're doing what you want, if you're pursuing your arts in your own way, that is never a waste of time. And I would add that, as a sober person, as someone who's been in recovery for 15 years, that the art that people made when I needed it most, that it was there and it literally saved my life. And the idea that the art that I'm making may help someone through a difficult period in their life makes it all more than valid. I don't even have to question the fact whether it's worth doing, because I know it is. I know that art can save you, can lift you out of difficult places. And so I would just encourage anyone who's having that crisis of like, man, why should I write my story? Why should I play this guitar when hospitals are being bombed? It's like I would say you got to follow your heart and make the art that you were meant to make.
Man, that was moving. That was eloquent. I can't think of a single possible better way to go out here. Thanks, everybody, for checking out what is going to be the first full episode of Writers on Writing, coming out of the gate in 6 hours or fewer. The author is Jim Ruland. The book is Make It Stop, which he was just showing there over on the other rectangular part of your rectangular screen. There will be, of course, there are full links to all of these projects in the notes with some supplementary complimentary speakage in the notes by me about these projects. So thanks for being here. Take care, one and all. Bye for now. Jim, thank you so much.
Adios.